You might have to remind me of the elevator pitch. I'm not good at elevator pitches. But you know, I've never been asked before to speak in my capacity as an independent. And so I had to think about that this afternoon. You know, a long time ago, I was a Democrat, and after that, I was a Republican for a long time. But, you know, I have found a home as an independent. And I was thinking, you know, what makes independents similar to each other? And I think, and maybe someone on this call can correct me if I'm wrong, I think independents are less likely to fall in love with politicians. Judge Kopp and Dean Campbell accepted, of course. But I think it's true that there are a fair number of Democrats and a fair number of Republicans who can get a bit overly romantic about politicians. And the thing about Prop 16 is that it's going to put a lot of discretion, that is, a lot of power in the hands of elected officials, appointed officials. You know, it's not just the state legislature, which, by the way, is pretty much out of control these days, but it's also the elected officials of city and county governments, the appointed officials of city and county governments, and for that matter, of course, the University of California and Cal State University. If you don't love politicians, if you don't think that your city councilor walks on water, you might want to be very, very careful before you put a load of power in their hands by repealing these words from the Constitution. Dean Campbell paraphrased the words a little bit. Let me give you the words again, because I've memorized them years ago and I like recite them in my sleep. And that is, the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. You know, I don't know how those words sound to you, but they sound really important to me. And the idea of striking them from the Constitution strikes me as a very, very big mistake. I think Proposition 209 has been a great success here in California for a number of reasons. And Dean Campbell and Judge Kopp have already mentioned some of those. Dean Campbell's argument is, I think, the one that comes to mind first because it's the strongest. It's the argument from principle that we as Americans just plain don't discriminate on the basis of race, not when we're doing what we should be doing. And that's why the words are important. Judge Kopp made that argument as well. Judge Kopp also throws in a very practical argument. Repealing Prop 209 is going to be really expensive. You know, if this stuff adds up over that course of 20 some years now, the savings, as Judge Kopp says, have been in 2020 dollars, $1 billion, and that's just the Caltrans contracts. That's just a tiny bit of the public contracts that are entered into by the state and its various localities and instrumentalities. I want to make an argument that hasn't been made so far, and that is, if you are tempted to vote for Prop 16 because you think it will help the disadvantaged, then I think I can disabuse you of that argument. It is going to have just the opposite effect. Prop 209 does not forbid giving a little leg up to, for example, applicants to the University of California because they are disadvantaged in some individualized way. Most importantly, low-income applicants. The University of California already gives a little leg up to students who are low income. Also students whose parents didn't have a chance to go to school. It's not a huge preference because huge preferences tend to disadvantage the student who gets them. You're not doing anybody any favor by sending them to a college or university where their entering academic credentials make them to where they're likely to be towards the bottom of the class if they go to that school. But the University of California does indeed give an advantage to people based on low income, based on other social factors that point to that individual having a disadvantage. The effect of Prop 16 is going to be that students who apply to the University of California who are from high income families, sometimes very high income families, they would be getting preferential treatment simply because they happen to be the same race as other students who might be genuinely disadvantaged. In California, we have African-American billionaires. We have female billionaires, and we are delighted because guess what? You know, they're paying a lot of taxes and we love them and they want them to stay, please stay. But the idea that their children should get preferential treatment or that female students doesn't make any sense. By the way, actually female students these days are the majority at the University of California, so you're more likely to get the opposite, preferential treatment for male students if Prop 16 passes. And you know, the notion that somebody should be given preferential treatment based on their race and sex, particularly when they are high income, to me that's an absolute deal breaker. I mean, that cannot possibly be good policy. And so that by itself, I think is a very strong reason to not vote for 16. It's not what you think it is. It is not going to be giving a benefit to the disadvantaged. To the contrary, once the University of California is able to give preferences based solely on race, which is definitely what they would prefer to do, bear in mind that when you give preferences to low-income students, you have to give them a nice financial package as well. In many ways, the University of California would much prefer to give preferential treatment to people based on race. And that's what they will do if Prop 16 passes. So if you're interested in keeping a little leg up for students who are low income, then you definitely want to vote no. So that's a reason that many people are unaware of. They think that they are going to be benefiting the disadvantaged if they vote yes, but it isn't so. It simply isn't so. Another issue that deserves at least a little bit of discussion here is that back in 1995, before preferences were outlawed by Prop 209, the University of California was not, you know, it wasn't a gentle thumb on the scale in favor of underrepresented minorities. It was a very, very strong preference, worth hundreds of points on the SAT, or alternatively worth quite a bit in a high school GPA. These were not close cases. And as a result, what was happening was that students were going to schools, if they were underrepresented minorities, where they weren't as competitive and they were much less likely to get honors. And students are, you know, when they do well in school, it makes them like school. It makes them think that, you know, this is something great. They want to go on to graduate school. And when they're getting low grades, you know, it's not as much fun, let me tell you. Right after Prop 209 went into effect, there was a comparison at the University of California at San Diego. The year before it went into effect, there was one African-American honor student in the whole class, out of a class of, I think, about 3,000, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. Just one in the whole class. After Prop 209 went into effect, it was 20% of the African-American students getting honors. That is a huge difference. And at the bottom of the class, the same thing. There had been many, many, many African-American students who were in academic jeopardy after Prop 209 went into effect. Same percentages for African-Americans as for other students. That's what you want. You know, you don't want somebody going to school and having the experience of people that look like me seem to disproportionately do poorly. That creates an attitude towards studying that you don't want to see that in school. You want people to be successes. There was an economist a few years back, Peter Arcidiacono at Duke University. He's an economist there on faculty. He and his co-investigators looked at the numbers after Prop 209 went into effect. They are very careful economists, very careful statisticians. They found that because of Prop 209, because of it, graduation rates for underrepresented minorities went up. Grade point averages for underrepresented minorities shot up. And the number of underrepresented minorities who majored in science and engineering, and therefore were much more likely to get a job when they got out, and that's important. boom, went up. All of it happened basically instantaneously, or as instantaneously as anything happens in college. I mean, that entering class did better than previous entering classes. That is hugely important. And to throw that away by passing Prop 16, ripping that language out of the state constitution would be, I think, a terrible mistake. And so what is, Steve, you wanted the elevator version, is that right? Is that
yes, right.
Okay, I like the
to equip listeners to talk to someone and convince them why.
I think that the three-word slogan that was used in Washington State last year, keep discrimination illegal. To me, that says everything. That everyone knows that race discrimination is wrong. That's not to say that there is none of it. There still is, of course there is, and there's still sex discrimination. Far less, I think, than people on the left think, much, much less. But you're not gonna solve that by taking something out of the Constitution that makes it illegal. We need to keep discrimination and preferential treatment illegal.